Why don't we pay teachers more? This is a question we hear almost every single day, and it's a valid one. After all, teachers are important because they guide us in learning and help us develop new skills. They also inspire us to explore our interests and reach our full potential. So why is it so hard to pay them more? Well, first, to understand that, we must understand how budgets work. I'm going to take a dive into the truth about school budget. In the realm of education, school budgets take center stage, shaping how funds are distributed. These financial plans raise important questions about fairness, access, and achieving educational goals. Where does the money come from? School funding derives from various sources, primarily including government allocations, local property taxes, and sometimes federal grants. These financial streams converge to create the budget that supports educational programs, teacher salaries, infrastructure maintenance, and student resources. Joining us to talk about this is Thomas Tripeny, who was an assistant principal for 11 years and head principal for 12 years.
The school district allocates different funds to different categories. So they may do a certain amount of money towards instruction, a certain amount of money towards, it's mostly instructional stuff, but there's different, some of it will go towards language arts, some towards math, sometimes science. Sometimes there's an Eisenhower grant that drops money into science. We get an amount that goes into what we call our general fund, and we have a lot of flexibility with what we buy in that. So let's say we wanted to, reward the teachers after testing with a breakfast, or during testing with breakfast sandwiches. We could use the general fund for that. If we wanted to buy computers, whatever we wanted to use, there was just very few rules that are associated with the general fund. As long as it's educationally based, and you can only spend a certain percentage of your money on food, which I believe is 10%. So you got to stay under 10% of that on food. But if you needed something for your playground or a school sign, electronic sign or something like that, you'd use a general fund. And we have a bookkeeper, and she keeps track of all the different spots. This pretty sophisticated software system we use. It's called PeopleSoft. So the chorus, there's a fund for, see what else do we have. There's so many different areas. There's probably 6 or 7 different areas. And then from my point of view, I would have a pie graph, and I can see how much we're spending in each area, or also how much is left in each area. And, hopefully you're spending the most of it in instruction.
Also joining us is Billy Coxhead, who is a CFO at a private school and has been doing it for 26 years.
And again, being a private school, roughly 92% of our revenue, if you want to call it that, is tuition. So families paying tuition represents 92% of our revenue. And then the other 8% comes from contributions. And that can either be what we call the annual fund. Basically, we are asking even if parents, once they pay tuition, they still get asked to contribute, which they can get a charitable deduction for, contribute to the annual fund. And then we also ask families to contribute to our endowment, and we build up an endowment. And so we'll get some earnings off our endowment. So the other 8% is contributions and endowment, but endowment doesn't get created on its own. It's got to be started with contributions, just a little slightly different in whether you spend it immediately or try to allow that to grow. So 92% tuition, 8% contributions.
How much of the money gets allocated toward payroll? Staff salaries are the single biggest expense in every school's budget. NCES reports that in a typical district budget, 90% is reserved for salary and benefits, according to blog.alavo.com.
That's a common question, and the round number is 75% of our budget is payroll and benefits. We also wrap in benefits as part of the compensation package, and the major benefits are retirement contributions, health insurance are the two main ones. We got some other ancillary ones, but those are the two main things. But and health insurance is obviously really expensive and concern for everybody. And anyway, that's a big part of the benefit package. But anyway, 75% goes to payroll and benefits.
So the way our school district is huge, we're the 12th or 13th largest in the nation. So the the overall budget for the district is allocated, I believe, in the 80s. It's over 80%, somewhere between 80 and 85% of the district's budget is for that. But we don't actually pay the teachers. They get their money from the district. We get what's called points. So we don't actually have a spending limit, as a numerical spending limit as far as money goes. So based on our school size, we get allocations, and it's through our FTE funding. We get allocated a certain amount of points. So maybe at my school, we had about 750 kids. So let's say we might get, what it was, I think it was about 55 points or something like that. So teachers 1 point, paraprofessionals half a point, and an instructional clerk would be a 0.4, and assistant principal would be a 1.25. So that was our budget. So it wasn't a financial budget. And the beauty of that is we can get the most experienced teachers with the highest degrees in it, and it has no impact on how we our spending, pretty much.
Okay.
So it's where a lot of schools, I know, they get a certain amount of money, and they're kind of penalized, so to speak, if they hire teachers who are 30 years with a doctorate, and that's almost the same as 2 teachers probably, and we don't have to fool around with that. So there's also the Title I budget. I don't know if you want to go get into that or not. Title I budget is it's a federal program for schools who have a higher poverty level to give them an advantage. We don't have. I was a Title I school, so we were about generally most years we were around 73-74% free and reduced lunch. Each district has different cut scores which qualify them for the Title I. When I first started in the district, that number was around 30, in the low 30s, around 30%, and you qualified. Now it's in the 60% or so to qualify for the Title I funds. A school my size in my district would get about $250,000 once a year, and I would spend it almost always, the majority of it, on staffing.
Okay.
We would get what they call carryover money, which was any money that wasn't spent, I guess, in the district. We would get a little boost, and the district had to hold back a certain amount of money, so we would get another $50,000 to $70,000 in the fall, and I would use that for stuff like
in the realm of education, school budgets take center stage,
and then
shaping how funds are distributed. These financial plans raise important questions about fairness,
most of my
access,
career we needed
and achieving
computers.
educational
Now the
goals.
district supplied a computer for all the students, so that's not an issue that we have. But with that spending at $250,000, sounds like a lot. You're thinking, teacher salary $50,000 starting. It doesn't go as far as you think, because you also have to buy their benefits, and the benefits package is very expensive. It's not just their health insurance, it's their sick days, it's their retirement. There's a lot of things that go into that. So $50,000 teacher might cost you, $75,000. So the benefit package is another $25,000. So before you know it, that money's gone. And usually I could get about 4 teachers.
How much money is spent per student? Nationally, public school spending per student experienced the largest fiscal year-to-year increase since 2008, up 6.3% to $14,347, according to new data from the 2021 Annual Survey of School System Finances, according to census.gov.
Again, it's a lot of it's based, on points, so it's not like a cash value. It's not just the body, the warm body. It's also what the student, does he have a disability? So different disabilities qualify you for more, different FTE amounts, what they call it, and that gives you more credit, so to speak, as far as your funding goes, which translates into those staffing points. For the most part, our budget in dollars for those things that we spend, for the most part, that's pretty much just per student. But for our staffing, there's a lot of different things. Gifted. How are you serving these students? Are they with a gifted teacher all day? Are they with an ESOL teacher all day? The more segments that they are with a certified or endorsed teacher that specializes in whatever their needs are and what they qualify for, you would tend to get more funding for that. And parents think, you're trying to get my kid. No, we don't get cash. It's just helps us get more staff that helps them, have smaller groups.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's not like that for the public school. We don't have any kind of calculations on how much we're spending per student. When we build the budget, it's more of a what are the needs for next year?
Mm-hmm.
How much do we need to pay our teachers, give them a raise of some kind, hopefully trying to outpace inflation? And then what are the other budgetary items that we need to run the school? Landscaping, athletics, fine arts, text and teaching materials, whatever. And we roll it up that way and say, okay, these are all our expenses. What is the tuition to cover this whole thing? And so once we get that number, we also build it in. We have to obviously project the number of students. And so the big budgetary item is, the number of students, and then how much do we have to charge those students to cover the expenses. So, I mean, in one sense, you could sort of, I guess, say that the tuition per student is a rough estimate of the cost per student, but we don't view it that way because, our budgetary students, we have 4 tuition levels, and that's what complicates the things a little bit. So, kindergarten is one tuition band, first grade through 4th grade is another tuition band, 5th and 6th grade is a tuition band, and 7th through 12th grade is another tuition band. So we sort of build it by number of students that we expect we're going to get. Here are all our expenses. How much do we need to charge in order to cover all those?
Who has the final say on budget decision?
In my school system, we really have a lot of autonomy as the principal, as long as we don't have a reputation for making bad choices. They give us a lot of flexibility. I hire who I want to hire, but it's still ultimately is the board's decision, but they don't really go through it all. We interview, we send them through HR. The HR approves it essentially, but they don't interview them, or no one else interviews them. They just make sure that they don't have, they have to go through background checks to make sure their credentials are exactly what they said on their resume, those types of things. But as far as that goes, and as far as the spending goes, we do when we do purchase orders, we have to have those approved. My bookkeeper will put it in, then I approve it, and then it goes to the district's finance department, and then they approve it. But generally everything runs smoothly. There's not really any hiccups in there unless you're again doing something you're not supposed to. There's a certain amount where you're not supposed to spend over without permission. And initial permission, I can't think of it. That's it's either $5,000 or $10,000 that you have to get kind of a special process for that. And that was pretty rare that I had to do that.
Okay.
Since we are a private school, basically the bulk of the work of collecting the data and presenting the information falls on me. But we obviously have a head of school that is obviously an integral part of this. But we also have a board of trustees. They are all volunteers. Many of them are parents of the school, but not all of them. And they make the final say. But a subset of that board of trustees is a finance committee. And so that's where the bulk of the actual work goes on. We'll have a marathon finance committee meeting at budget time, going over all the assumptions that I have put in, which I've gotten information from admissions, the head of school, whatever. And we'll show it to the finance committee, and we'll actually run iterations of different scenarios of number of students, tuition increase, compensation increase. And, there's certainly a little bit of an art in addition to a science to put into it. But anyway, the finance committee makes a recommendation to the full board, and the full board is the one that approves.
What is surprisingly a huge expense?
Yeah, I would say paper and copy accounts, so your copy machines and the amount of clicks. So even though you may do a 2-sided copy and you're saving money on paper, it counts as 2 clicks. And the maintenance agreements through these copy contractors, they charge you by the click. So it's a certain amount, it's 2 clicks. And the amount, even though we're so digital now, it's amazing how much paper that we use. It's better than it was, but it's still pretty high. It's just unbelievable. And our school was a decent size compared to a lot of schools in the country. It's small for my district, probably in the bottom 10 percentile as far as size. but nationally it's probably one of the bigger ones at 750. Where our schools are more usually a little closer to 1,000 for the elementary level. But yeah, it's a ridiculous amount.
Wow.
No, that's a great question. And the initial answers are security. And that has become more and more important and a greater and greater dollar value over the last 5-10 years, especially with this last school shooting in Nashville, Tennessee. That was a very close like school to ours. And so that made a lot of people anxious about, well, what are we doing? Could we prevent something like that? And you can't prevent everything, but it is putting a heightened awareness on security. And so we spend a lot of money on security in terms of cameras, even though that doesn't stop any coming in. But we have 2 police officers that we pay to be on our campus from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day. School is in session. But in terms of entrance to the doors, we got to have access to the doors. Nobody can get in. All the doors are locked. You got to have some kind of access, somebody key. And anyway, the point of it is security is a big expense that used to not be as. And then the second one is technology and trying to provide students with current technology to prepare them for college and beyond. And so that just feels like a black hole at sometimes, the amount of money that we spend for in classroom instruction that involves technology.
Can teachers get paid more?
Boy, that's the $100,000 question right there. Is it really long term? If a school like Wesleyan were trying to solve that problem, we would find a benefactor who would donate $50 million to the school's endowment to fund teacher salaries. And so that would allow us to use earnings off the endowment in perpetuity to pay teachers more. Now, that is, the odds of that happening are low, but the other side of it is, we have to keep raising tuition to pay teachers more. And there are limits on how much you can charge in tuition before you run everybody off. Even the top 1%, eventually they're just not going to pay any more in tuition. So there's nothing that we've got that would solve that instantaneously. So we do, again, with the biggest part of our budget already going to comp and benefits, to pay people more, we got to raise tuition more, and there are only certain limits. We got limits on that. So again, apart from somebody just dumping an endowment number on us that we could then use, I don't know how to do it.
We're already allocating a huge part of our budget to teacher salaries. Of course, we wish we could pay the teachers a lot more. They really work hard. It's until you've walked in their shoes, you don't know what they go through. There's so many different moving parts. Not only do they have 20 to 30.
Joining us to talk about this is Thomas Trippeney. He was an assistant principal for 11 years and head principal for 12 years.
They have all the professional development.
Also joining us is Billy Coxhead, who is a CFO at a private school and has been doing it for 26 years.
Everything that a parent would be, they're that at school, and sometimes they're that because that parent is not there, or maybe a grandparent's raising them. So the job and the stress and the pressure, a lot of teachers have a hard time sleeping at night because of all the different things that they're thinking about. Did my student get home? Were they safe when they got there? Was there abuse? If they're worried about giving them sending home a note because they're afraid they might get beat, and come back with who knows what type of marks or injuries. So the districts have to depend on, it's really kind of economy driven. So the better the tax base or the higher the millage rate is, the better the opportunities for schools and teachers to get raises. So if communities want more money for their teachers, it would be best if they kind of lobbied for higher taxes on their property taxes and stuff like that. Sometimes the rich get richer. The better the school system, it attracts businesses, and the more businesses, that also raises the tax rate. Some of your big cities, they've got an enormous amount of tax rates because they've got an airport there. They've got, conferences that go on with all the hotels, and all that generates extra funds that ends up trickling into the schools. So, a well-run county makes a huge difference in the amount of money that comes into the school.
What is something everyone should understand when it comes to school budget?
One thing I would say is that sometimes they get a little bit worked up about small potatoes. In other words, our budget in our district is over $2 billion, and they get upset when the superintendent is making an extra whatever amount of money, and it's really small potatoes, or the district spends this, and most everything that's done is done for a very good reason, and they have to understand that in the grand scheme of things, a couple of extra school resource officer is not going to break the budget. There's a lot of need for school police and their presence, and also they work very hard, our school resource officers, on building their brand, so to speak, and building relationships with the students. So when they encounter police on the outside of the school, they feel comfortable approaching them and not afraid of them.
Yeah, that tuition does not cover 100% of the school's budget or cover 100% of the school's expense. And so even though it's 92% roughly, and that seems like a lot, it still doesn't cover everything. And so we're still looking for ways to balance the budget outside of tuition. Therefore, its gifts and contributions allow us to do that. But barring that, we would have to cut expenses, and based on the school population and what we're trying to do to attract students, that's a tough one too. So what would people know? Tuition doesn't cover everything.
Thank you for watching TFD Deep Dives. For more episodes like this one, please make sure to like or follow. Reporting to you from Fairview Heights, Illinois, I am Ben from TFD Deep Dive.